The angels are not the only heavenly beings in the Bible. There's a hierarchy of them, and depending on who you ask, your classic humanoid angels are actually pretty far down the ladder.
They know everything they're supposed to know when they look upon the face of God. They make one choice for God or against God, and everything else follows after that.
There are two mysterious beings mentioned in the Bible that you may have never heard of.
I then heard a voice say, "Lay, child, everything's okay. You've got nothing to worry about. Here to help you."
Above the congregation, you can hear like the sustained note in between it. It's high pitched. I can't describe it any other way other than there was glory on what was being sung.
And so I went outside the door and I looked to the left, I looked to the right, I looked around the building, and there was no man. I knew then I just talked to an angel.
And it would be good about the amazing truth that both the angels, but also the demons, are active in your life.
Hi, and welcome to another installment of Soul and Scriptures. Today, we explore the mysteries of angels, not as vague symbols, but as living truths with ancient roots, heavenly power, and real-life presence. Let's begin at the foundation. In our first reflection, Father Ambrose helps us understand the very nature of angels, not as winged figures of imagination, but as beings created by God with pure intellect and will. These aren't fragments of myth, but divine intelligences that move with purpose. As Hebrews 1:14 reminds us, are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? Let's listen in.
So what are angels made of?
Great.
What do they look like?
Okay.
And yeah, tell me more about their, I guess it would be their ontology, the ontology of an angel.
What are they? So they are messengers. They are the intermediaries between God and mankind. They bring important messages to earth. They also are involved. We learn from the fathers of the church, reflecting on the Holy Scriptures, that they're also involved in the creation of the universe. They are in the hierarchy of being between God himself and the Holy Trinity and the created material order. The angels stand in between those two. They are created beings, but they are not material. They are pure spirits, pure created spirits, and they have a rational nature like humans do, meaning that they have intellect and a free will. An intellect and a will is what makes them rational like humans are rational. They only do God's will. They perfectly do God's will. The holy angels, this kind of goes back to a previous conversation we've had about fallen angels and holy good angels, the holy angels we call them. The holy angels are perfectly aligned to the will of God from the moment of their creation after they chose in that one perfect act of their will. They know everything they're supposed to know when they look upon the face of God. They make one choice for God or against God, and everything else follows after that. It's a perfect act of their rational will.
That must be so nice, by the way.
I know, right?
Why can't, I mean,
Perfectly aligned.
Obviously,
we're going to have it in heaven.
We're going to have it in heaven, I
Praise
know.
God.
But every day we're making a million choices and half of them are bad. It's like,
Because we don't see or know with that kind of clarity, because we are composite beings with bodies along with our immortal souls. Whenever angels show up, people see them. And presumably that's not just somehow a trick of the mind that the angels affect, but it's also a reality in a physical body, which they can take up, they can assume. And it's because the angelic world has this access to the material world. Already from the beginning of the universe, the fathers tell us that in the creation of the universe, God, who works through these hierarchical and instrumental means, he used the angels to whip up the matter of the created material universe. So
that's a cool idea.
So why couldn't they take up the material that looks like a human body and inhabit it for a while so as to appear to us? You know.
So you're saying that the early church fathers, they theorize, are they speaking with full confidence that God used the angels as instruments to create the world as we know it?
Yes. So they theorized, and that goes along with the understanding of cosmology, how the world works, how philosophy works. what natural philosophy is. They understood that there is this wonderful hierarchy of being from, as I said, God himself at the very pinnacle of it, God who is immaterial, immortal, without anything outside of him. And when he acted outside of himself to create the visible order of the material world, the universe in which we live, and to create us, he also created the angels. So the Fourth Lateran Council, which is the beginning of the 1200s, said that defined, of course, this is much later than the early church fathers, but the reflection of the church upon scriptural truths and the realities of Christian doctrine continues to unfold through time. So the Fourth Lateran Council said that God created the angels, and also there's a part of that council that says that he created the angels before he created mankind. So there's an order to the way that God created things, and the angels helped with that ordering and with that creation. So again, that's all theoretical, but not purely speculative.
Yes.
It's not just someone's sort of imaginative idea. It's based in the truths that we know from philosophy and theology.
From the clear and orderly nature of angels, we now turn to something more bewildering. Visions so strange, they make us stop and stare. Straight from the pages of the Old Testament comes a portrait of angels, unlike any you've seen in art galleries. Wheels covered in eyes, creatures with multiple faces. These are no gentle messengers, but beings that tremble with glory and awe. Let's peer into the biblical imagination, where mystery and majesty collide.
Okay, so angels come from the Old Testament, the first half of the Bible for Christians, or the whole Bible, known as the Tanakh, for Jews. The Old Testament was written down in modern-day Israel and Palestine from about the 6th century BCE to the 3rd century BCE. Although many scholars believe the biblical stories themselves are much older, we get the word angel from the Greek angelos, originally from the Hebrew word malach, which roughly translates to messenger. These messengers appear in the Old Testament a number of times. They carry God's messages from heaven and earth and sometimes act on his behalf. The angels, known as malach, are not the only heavenly beings in the Bible. There's a hierarchy of them, and depending on who you ask, your classic humanoid angels are actually pretty far down the ladder. In the Middle Ages, a Jewish scholar known as Maimonides drew up a hierarchy of angels, and if you look here, your classic humanoid angels, the malach, are pretty low down. But not quite as low as cherubim. Forget those chubby-winged angels. According to the Bible, cherubim are animal-human hybrids. The first time we see them is in the book of Genesis, right after Adam and Eve have been kicked out the garden. The cherubim don't look like your average angel. Instead, they look more like the mythical beasts in ancient Mesopotamia, especially the Babylonian Iyamasu, which is the wings of an eagle, the body of a lion, and the head of a king. These would act as guardians to sacred places like temples, or the palace or city walls, and performed a similar role to the biblical cherubim. They look similar to their Egyptian cousin, the Sphinx, or the Hittite griffin. Many believe that these biblical angels were descendants of these mythological creatures from Mesopotamia. Moving up the list, we get these guys, seraphim. They're described in the book of Isaiah as follows. Seraphs were in attendance above him. Each had 6 wings, with 2 they covered their faces, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And one called the other and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, and the whole earth is full of his glory. In medieval Christian theology, seraphim is the highest choir of the angelic hierarchy. They are the caretakers of God's throne. Again, continuously singing, Holy, 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 all day, every day. So, seraphim, their name comes from the word seraph, to burn. So seraphim may mean something like the burning ones. Okay, well, where do they come from? Going further into seraphim's name reveals its origins. The Hebrew word for a venomous serpent of the desert is saraph. In ancient Egypt, the cobra was often referred to as the flaming one, an image of which, called a uraeus, was worn by the pharaoh. Thus, saraph may be the Hebrew term for cobra, and perhaps where our seraphim get their winged appearance from. Now again to the strangest beings in the Bible, the ophanim, or simply known as the wheels. They're a pair of interlocking gold wheels with eyes around the outside, and they hover and float in the sky. In the same vision as before, Ezekiel describes them alongside the cherubim. Quote, As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the earth beside the living creatures, one for each of the four of them. As for the appearance of the wheels and their construction, their appearance was like the gleaming of beryl, and the four had the same form, their construction being something like a wheel within a wheel. When they moved in any of the four directions without veering as they moved. Their rims were tall and awesome, for the rims of all four were full of eyes all around. When the living creatures moved, the wheels moved beside them. And when the living creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose. Wherever the Spirit would go, they went, and the wheels rose along with them. For the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. The wheels are beings who are meant to carry God's throne, making them some of the holiest and certainly the strangest beings in the Bible. Where do these wheels come from? Well, no one really knows this one. Conspiracy theorists believe that Ezekiel is describing UFO due to its strange shape and movement. Or, perhaps, seeing that this all takes place in a trippy vision, it could be the product of the prophet ingesting a psychedelic plant. More grounded scholars interpret the wheels metaphorically, a stand-in for God's unknowability or some other, often quite elaborate interpretation. But ultimately, no one really knows much more about the wheels. They're never mentioned anywhere else.
Those otherworldly forms remind us how vast and varied the angelic realm really is. But beyond appearance lies purpose and history. From fiery chariots to guardians of Eden, this clip explores lesser-known angelic roles and moments in Scripture that reveal their power, purpose, and presence, both in battle and in guidance. This isn't just angelic trivia, it's a glimpse into divine design.
In Christianity, it's strongly thought that all believers are assigned their own guardian angel, and this idea actually does have biblical roots, specifically from the book of Psalms, Psalm 91. Quote, "If you say, 'The Lord is my refuge,' He will command His angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways." End quote. So, to answer the popular question, does everyone have a guardian angel? The biblically accurate answer is, they're only assigned to true believers. These angels are shown many times helping believers in danger. For example, in the Gospel of Matthew, an angel warns Joseph to take Mary and the baby Jesus and flee to Egypt for their survival. Other guardian angels are shown answering desperate prayers and even comforting believers in their time of death. However, there is one big exception. Helping people out might not always be part of God's plan, and guardian angels don't make exceptions to His will. It's important to learn this lesson before putting your safety in their hands. As the Epistle to the Hebrews warns, quote, "Some true believers faced jeers and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. Persecuted and mistreated, they wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in the ground. These believers were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what they had been promised, since God had planned something better." End quote. Even Jesus Christ Himself, the immortal incarnation of God on earth, was not immune to the plans of God. When Jesus was arrested in the Gospel of Matthew, He asserted, quote, "Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and He will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way?" End quote. There are two mysterious beings mentioned in the Bible that you may have never heard of. The first of these is mentioned only once in the Bible, and specifically in the book of Genesis. After God banished Adam and Eve, quote, "At the east of the Garden of Eden, He placed the cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life." End quote. This verse seems to imply that, just like the cherubim, this flaming sword was assigned to guard the entrance to Eden. Traditionally, it was interpreted as a weapon given to the cherubim. However, there are reasons to believe this flaming sword may actually be a living entity, an angelic species, unlike any we've encountered thus far. First off, this sword is apparently capable of movement, turning in every direction at its post. And the actual Hebrew term used to describe this sword, lahat cherub, literally translates to flame of the whirling sword, which not only emphasizes its movement, but doubles down on its fiery nature, implying that the object or creature itself is more flame than sword. And of course, the association with fire makes the angel theory all the more likely. As for our second speculative angelic species, the second book of Kings describes the following, quote, "There appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven, and Elisha saw it, and he cried," end quote. This was the last time the prophet Elijah was seen on earth, making him one of the mere handful of humans believed to have entered heaven alive. This vision, though, of burning chariots and horses in the sky was seared into the mind of Elijah's protege, Elisha, who would inherit the role of God's chosen prophet. And apparently, Elisha inherited these chariots and horses too. While it's implied that only Elisha could see them, others being wholly unaware, make no mistake, these beings were apparently very real, and their presence would be vital to some of Elisha's greatest military victories. When the servant got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. "Oh no, my lord, what shall we do?" the servant asked. "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. End quote. All right, the natural question to ask first is whether these horses and chariots are one angelic species, or perhaps two. Strangely, none of the verses that mention these creatures describe any riders or drivers in the chariots, so it wouldn't be a stretch to wonder whether these chariots themselves are alive.
And yet, angels are not only watchers of history, they are companions in our most personal moments, even when we don't realize it. Here, stories emerge of guardian angels intervening. Subtle, silent, yet unmistakable. A priest appears out of nowhere. A message reaches a heart miles away. And always, the angels guide us toward confession, healing, and ultimately, to God. Sometimes, miracles speak quietly.
So it's very good to acknowledge your angels and God, first of all, God, but then his beautiful creatures, the angels, and all they do for us. And it would be good about the amazing truth that both the angels, but also the demons, are active in your life, seeking to influence you. You could say Lucifer was the original influencer and still is today, very busy influencing many. So ponder the spiritual role of your angels in your life, of God's angels in your life, and consider the various ways you can learn more about them. And you can acknowledge your guardian angel. They like to be acknowledged. It's not a pride thing. They just, it's nice to be thanked on occasion for the work you're doing. And you can even ask for the intercession of the highest degrees of angels to join them in their divine worship. So when you go to pray, you can ask if you can join in their divine worship before the throne and pray for their protection. And, of course, ask them to communicate to you the highest truths of our faith and things about God. They can impart knowledge. This one particular day, this is back, maybe 20 years ago. I was with two other young men, and we were walking through the vineyard. And back then, the vineyards were pretty big. There was no real building going on at the time in those fields. So you could walk for quite a while through the vineyard to get from the church all the way to the back area where the mountain is. And it was particularly hot one day, and we were talking about, something that we were in one of these groups where we were sharing, our stories about our lives. And this one guy said, man, the more I look over my life, the more I'm seeing, there's a lot of sins I probably haven't confessed that I really should confess. And the other guy said, well, we weren't particularly close to the church. We were way out in this field. And he said, well, we can ask our angels to send you a priest. And I'm thinking, that doesn't sound very practical. If you're holding out for that, you're probably not going to go to confession. But I didn't voice my opinion. I just was thinking very skeptically that that's never going to happen. But we prayed the prayer. We asked our guardian angels to go bring us a priest for this other guy. And we sat down and just started talking. And about a minute later, out from behind these grapevines appears a priest. And we just stared at him, and he said, which one of you wanted to have your confession? And we both looked at the other guy and pointed at him, and then we both ran out of there. In a similar way, there was a group of women. They were very loyal fans of a priest that was in Italy, and they had learned that the priest was very sick, and he wasn't coming out of his monastery. I guess it had been some time that he'd been shut up in there and wasn't seeing people. And they thought it could be the end of his life, and they very much wanted to see him perhaps if he was going to die. So they decided they're going to drive all night to get to this monastery. And they were going to, when they started out, whatever time it was, they realized they're going to arrive there very early in the morning. And, they were concerned about how are we going to let him know we're coming. And same thing. One of them said, let's send our guardian angels to tell him we're on our way. They were sort of like his spiritual daughters. And they sent their angels. And when they arrived and pulled up to the gates, that lock the monastery away from the rest of the world, the priest was sitting out there in a folding chair at the gate. And they pulled up and said, Father, what are you doing out here? We heard you were very sick. He says, no, I've actually been recovering the last week or so, and your angels informed me you were going to be here in the morning very early, so I decided I would come out to meet you.
Now we step into something more intimate, an encounter with a heavenly warrior in a moment of deep despair. What happens when someone cries out from the pit of addiction and spiritual torment? And an angel answers. This raw testimony invites us into a battle for the soul, where light meets darkness, and the archangel Michael stands beside the brokenhearted. Psalm 34:7 says, "The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them." Let's witness a story of deliverance.
This is my testimony of how I met Archangel Michael. 3 years ago, just after my 25th birthday, I was in a really bad way. I was a really lost individual. I used to use a lot of ice, or meth as they call it in America. I really didn't enjoy my birthdays because they were just a reminder of how it was just another year of the same old thing. But not long after my 25th birthday, I had a scary incident one night while I was high that I don't want to go into too much detail about, but it scared me enough to convince me, I thought I was going to die. Some people call it an NDE, near-death experience. And when I had that mental breakdown and that scary incident, that was all in one night. And on that particular night, my brother's girlfriend prayed a prayer to Archangel Michael for me. I didn't know about this. As I was trying to get to sleep that night, but I was in such a state, falling asleep was really difficult. Somehow I managed to fall asleep. And I woke up the next day, and all I really remember is sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, fully conscious. I was wide awake, in a completely lost state. I couldn't even attach to the person I was before, but I felt like I'd just completely lost everything, and I was just nothing, and I didn't have a personality, and I couldn't really think. And as I sat there staring at the wall, I felt a hand touched my shoulder. The first feeling I had was immediate fear because I knew there was nobody in my bedroom, and a definite hand had just touched my left shoulder. So I went into an instant state of panic and shock. I then heard a voice say, "Lay, child, everything's okay. You've got nothing to worry about. I'm here to help you." The first thing I thought then was, well, you're hearing voices. You're definitely going to the mental institution now. And then again, I heard the voice, "Lay, child, everything's okay. You've got nothing to worry about. I'm here to help you." As I heard that voice again, it laid me and helped me lay on my side. And as I laid on my side, I heard the voice again say, "I'm going to make you feel better." As he said that, I felt a rush of the most euphoric, blissful, heavenly love I could possibly describe to anybody. It was like a mother that just gave birth to a newborn child. The way she would look at her times 10 million. It was your birthday. It was Christmas. It was New Year. It was seeing your best friend after 10 years of them being away. It was just every good, joyous, blissful, happy, ecstatic feeling I could possibly describe, all balled into one. When he touched me, and this feeling just went through my whole being. And I was vibrating at just the highest level of love I could possibly imagine. And I felt like I was home. As that happened, and that feeling rushed through my whole body, my eyesight went from my eyes looking at the wall, laying on my side, to then being in the top right-hand corner of my bedroom, looking down at myself on the bed. And I was on my side, looking at the wall, and behind me, there was an angel. He was about 10 feet tall, whose wings stretched across my bedroom. He had a Roman-style golden chest plate on. He had long, short, long, blondish hair. He had a Norwedic-looking face. He had the Roman centurion-style skirt on with the slits in it, the really old-school sandals with the rope that went right up the feet. I could see him clear as day. He told me that I was very lost, that I had nothing to worry about, and that everything was okay, and that he was always watching me from the day I was born to the day I will die. He will always be watching me. But I have nothing to worry about. He showed me segments of my life where things went wrong. He took me back to when I was in primary school as a young kid. There was one specific one where he took me back and he's like, "Do you remember how you felt before that happened?" I was like, "Yep, I felt like me. I felt like how I was supposed to feel, a child of God." And he's like, "Do you remember when that happened?" I was like, "I do remember when that happened." He's like, "Do you remember what it felt like?" And I was like, "Oh, I could feel it." And I was like, "Yeah, I didn't like that. But do you remember how you felt afterward?" And I specifically just remember thinking, ashamed to be myself. That's how I felt, ashamed to be myself. He kind of showed me how that shaped me. That event really shaped who I was. I was then, from that point onward, I was ashamed to be myself. When I went into situations, I was ashamed. But then he said, "Can you see how all that happened so you could be here with me now?" I was like, "Yep." In that state of love, I could just understand how everything worked. I was like, "Yep, I can understand that." He's like, "Yeah, so everything happens for a reason." And then he went on to show me what I kind of take now as the battle versus good versus evil. It went to a vision of a field, that was a huge field, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hectares wide and long. And on our side, it was completely blue. And it was just this blue misty fog that went on for a really, really long time. And as it went on and on and on and on, it reached a wall and it started climbing up the wall. And it was all blue on our side. And as it got to the very, very top of the wall and like started to peek over, it changed color to red, and it dropped red down the wall on the other side. And then it just went red for eternity that way. And I could clearly see it. And I was like, okay, what's this? And he goes like, this is the battle of good versus evil. You'd forgotten what side you were on. And now you've been reminded, you know what side you're on. You're on my side. And you just forgot who you were. You were just a bit lost. And I had this overwhelming feeling of let me up. I just want to fight. I want to get back in the battle. He said, no, you got to stay down. You got to recover. You got to rest. So toward the end of it, he just said, you've got nothing to worry about. Everything's okay. I'll always be watching you. I'll always be watching you. Everything's fine. Have faith. And yeah, as he said that, he just kind of slowly faded out, and I was left sitting there on the end of my bed, staring at the wall.
From the battlefield of the soul to the quiet corner of a fast food restaurant, angels can appear where we least expect. A man, a message, a ministry on the edge. This story is filled with prophetic weight, wrapped in ordinary setting. Sometimes, heaven comes dressed in cream-colored suits and brown shoes, and it changes everything. Here's what happened next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Prophet Jermaine Green. I want to talk to you today about the Popeye's angel. Now, wait a minute. I know what you're thinking. The name of the angel wasn't Popeye. But I do want to tell you about the experience that I had with an angel working at Popeye's restaurant. So I'm at work. It had to be like midnight or so. And there's a door that separates the lobby from the counter. And so I came out to just do my daily closing up. And so I'm wiping tables down and I'm sweeping the floor. And as I'm doing this, I start to feel like a presence behind me. Mind you now, there's a door to let you in and let you out. I didn't hear the door open at all. I just felt a presence behind me. And so I turned around and there was a man standing behind me. He had a bald head and really fair skin. And I remember this because I was captivated by, there were no blemishes on his skin. And he had no hair at all. His head was bald, his face was bald. It was like, man, where did you come from? He definitely looked like he didn't fit, especially in the area that we were in. And so he had on a cream suit and he had on some brown shoes. And what I remembered that was so significant about this was if I looked and stared at that man's suit long enough, it looked like his suit would mesh with his shoes. So it was almost like it was, I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's almost like they ran into each other. And if I blinked my eyes, they separated. This person or this man begins to talk to me and he tells me my name. Never met this man a day in my life, but he told me who I was. He's basically said, you're a prophet and your name is Jermaine. And so I said, yes. Now, mind you, I'm not a prophet at this time, but he called me a prophet. I said, okay, no problem. And then he also called my father's name. He said, Joe Green is your father. And he's an apostle. At this time, he's just a pastor. He's not an apostle. But I said, okay, I knew this man, knew what he was talking about. He was giving me a word of knowledge, at least to my understanding. And so this man begins to tell me I have a message that I have to release to you. And you cannot forget this message. And so I'm telling y'all, when he said that to me, I felt something go through my body like, you can't forget this. Almost like, you're about to get in trouble. And so everything in you freezes. So I was kind of frozen when he said that. And so I knew within myself, whatever he's about to say has to be significantly important. And then look at the time. It's past 12 o'clock. Anyway, as he starts to release the message, he tells me, he says, tell your father that he's not to close the ministry down. And the ministry belongs to God and not to him. And for him not to worry about the provision of the ministry because it's God's ministry and he's going to provide. These are the things that this man told me. And so when he told me, I was like, okay, yes, sir. I kind of took it in. And then he looked at me again and told me, he said, listen, you cannot forget what I'm telling you. This is very important. So he repeated the same thing again. So I was like, okay, no problem. I don't have a problem with that. We can do it. Not a problem. So as he says this and he turns to leave, I turned to leave as well, because it was a sense of urgency that I needed to go call them right away. I was about to call them and tell them, what this angel said. And so I'm going to the back, to go behind the counter. And I remember, I didn't thank him. So I turned around to thank him. By that time, the door was closing. And so I went outside the door, and I looked to the left, I looked to the right, I looked around the building, and there was no man. I didn't see him anymore. I knew then I just talked to an angel. And so I went back into the back with the other coworkers, and they were looking at me like, what's wrong? I was like, y'all didn't see, y'all didn't hear the conversation I just had? They said, yeah, we heard you talking to yourself. I need to let you all know there were security cameras in the back on the counter. And so they both were looking at the camera, wondering, why am I talking to myself? Now, we closed everything down as quickly as we could. And so I rushed over to my parents' house. And when I got there, of course, they were sleeping. And, I was trying to, wake my father up. And so finally he got up and he came. And I began to tell him what the angel said. And I released to him what the angel told me to tell him. And when I got done telling him what the angel said, my father, I called him my Superman. I can count on my fingers how many times I've seen him cry. As soon as I told him what the angel said, he dropped to his knees and began to wail like a baby. And so he's crying, and I look over, my mother's crying, and then I'm starting to tear up. Now, I don't even know what I'm crying for, because at this point in time, I'm not sure what this message is saying or what is it for. I know what the angel said, but I didn't know what it was pertaining to. And so understanding that, whatever this is, it's moved him because he's on his knees crying. And so right away after he got done crying, he gets to his feet and he looks at me and my mother, and he tells her and me that the night before he had told God on his knees he was resigning as a pastor, that he was closing the doors of the church because he had been praying to God, asking for provision, and nothing was coming. And so he felt like, well, maybe, this is not what you want me to do. So he was resigning. And so he got an angelic encounter through me, an angelic word to help shift his life. Now, 28 years later, he's still pastoring, and he is the apostle now that the angel saw when he was a pastor.
And finally, we turn to a moment caught not in memory, but on live stream. During a time of worship, something extraordinary pierced the veil, a heavenly harmony, heard not by one, but by many. Whether you believe in recorded miracles or not, what follows is a testimony to the power of collective wonder and divine presence.
And then during the worship portion, just before we were getting ready to minister to the sick, we're worshiping, singing the song, the chorus, Hallelujah. It's a simple chorus. And as we're worshiping, I could hear above the congregation now, I could hear another note, and it was sustained and it was high pitched. Now, I know we have a pad, a synth pad on the piano. I know we have backup singers. I know the congregation is singing, and I know our worship leader singing. But in that moment, I could hear almost like there was a balcony of singers above the people singing Hallelujah with us. So we continue to sing, and in the clip, you can actually see me stop for a moment. I'm thinking, okay, I want to make sure I'm actually hearing this. So I let it go on for another few seconds. And then I call our guitar player, who probably on the team is one of the more skeptical people. And so I asked him first to come and join me on the platform. I call him up. I ask him, I said, listen to the congregation and then listen to above them. I said, tell me what you hear. And he looked at me like shocked. And that's when I knew something supernatural was definitely happening, because he's shocked. I didn't know if it was just me hearing it in my spirit or if there was something actually manifesting above the congregation. And so he tells me, I hear like the people singing, someone singing above the congregation. So I have him go back, and then I call on Steve Moctezuma, our worship leader. I call Steve up. I said, Steve, do you hear this? And then I addressed the congregation. Now, this is where it gets interesting. When I asked the congregation or told them what was happening, It wasn't like they looked around in bewilderment and then tried to listen for themselves. There were several people, not everyone, but several people in the congregation who immediately affirmed what I had said because they themselves had been hearing it before I even said anything. In fact, a couple of people told me, and I have the messages, they said, well, I wanted to make sure I was actually hearing what I was hearing. Someone said, I thought I was going crazy until you said, guys, do you hear that? You look back on some of the comments on the live stream, there were people who were hearing it even before I said that. And so everyone was experiencing this supernatural angelic encounter, and we heard this heavenly singing joining with us. And this is something, of course, that we have on the live stream, and many people can report. Not everyone hears this, mind you, and this is partly what I think speaks to its supernatural nature, but some people can go back and listen. People feel it. Some people will say, I can sense the glory. Most every believer who watches this says, I can sense the glory. And then there are many who are saying, I'm hearing this. You can hear above all of the things that I mentioned, above the pad, above the backup singers, above Steve Moctezuma singing, above the congregation, you can hear like a sustained note in between it. It's ethereal, it's high pitched. I can't describe it any other way other than there was glory on what was being sung. And so many people are reporting that they can actually hear this on the live stream. And you and I got to talking about this, and I love that you mentioned to me that we had talked about this before. And it was something of the glory for sure, but I want to make it clear, these are only the beginning stages. In this season, heaven is touching earth, and there is something that is transforming. That is not revival rhetoric. The cynic will listen to that and they'll say, well, you've been saying that for a long time. But there is proof in the history of God's timeline that God always intervenes just when you think things are darkest. God always comes through just when you think there is no more hope, because he wants to be the one who gets the glory for what's happening. And so I believe we have like an ember, like a smoldering wick. And we're protecting that ember. We're protecting that smoldering wick. I believe that's the beginning stages of what will be a season of glory. Sid, this is bigger than anything we've ever known. And I don't say that with hyperbole. I don't say that to exaggerate. I don't say that to hype. This is the reality of what God does. He does exceedingly abundantly above all we could ask or even imagine.
Angels remind us that heaven is closer than we think, watching, guiding, and sometimes singing. They are not here to be worshipped, but to point us upward. So remember, in all your seeking, follow Christ, who sends his messengers to lead us back to him. Thank you for joining us on this journey. May you walk in the light, knowing you are never alone. Until next time, this is Soul and Scriptures. God bless.